Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Alchemy. I am really bursting with excitement today to bring you a very special guest. And this guest and myself have actually been in conversation for some time, probably over a year now, trying to drop in to do a podcast. And she is an Aussie babe. We love an Aussie babe. And I'd love to share with you our connection, how we've met, and how we've organically sort of been weaving together over the last couple of years. We actually only met online on Instagram, and Jade is an absolute powerhouse with her words, with her energy. She's one of those people that you can actually just feel the depth of her and like the magnitude of her through her words. And there's not many people that actually really hit me viscerally, like have a full body experience. So I believe she's deeply mystical, spiritual, but embodied, Aussie, mother, incredible. She's currently pregnant now. And her body of work that she's currently bringing forth is all about these beautiful energetic structures and collapsing portals and using them as a way to break patterns. It's a lot deeper and larger body of work than that just simplicity that I have shared with you, but I'd love to invite her on to share a bit deeper about her work. I am just in awe of her, and I know you will be too. So Jade, hello, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it's beautiful to be here. And like you said, we've been through such a journey of coming together and getting on the podcast. And a lot of that has been based in mothering for me, just like the openings for that. And then for you, recently having the flooding and all of these different things. But as we know, we always like arrive at a point of coming together when we need. And it feels really good at this moment, especially when I'm bringing through this kind of new material. If I had have spoken to you about even a month, a few weeks ago, I wouldn't have had the clarity or, just like the actual structure of what that work is. So it's kind of landed now and ready to speak to and get into it with you. So yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and what your work is, so to speak. I mean, it's such a large array, but I know it's always really I struggle to be like encapsulate myself into this little box. But just whatever feels called to share with everyone here today would be beautiful.
Yeah, I think I'll start with speaking about my writing because a lot of people connect through my social media and they come into contact with my field via my kind of coded, poetic writing that I do. And I think that that's really important to kind of touch base with initially, just to maybe contextualize that or to give that a bit of a framework around what I'm doing with my writing and what that serves, because I'm not a person who likes to do a standard kind of teaching carousel of like, this is embodiment, step one, step two, step three. I'd rather people get taken into this space and really like violently and like erotically moved and like have this experience and then have to come back out the other side and sit there and think, wait, what did I read? What did that just do to my body? I can feel that my field is recoding, but consciously that might not necessarily be, there might not be clarity in what that is. But there is a knowing that through reading that there was an experience and there was an alteration that's taken place. So I really use writing as a way of structurally altering or recoding people. And one thing that I had mentioned to you that I wanted to go into was this kind of idea around using language and linguistics in a way that like breaks them open, or having these like syntactical revolutions and what that provides us. And so I think that we play really small within language and we play really safe, even though we're trying to convey information in a way that's like clear and powerful and precise. We also have to understand that that way of writing within grammar is like a highly masculine way of writing. It's got like rigid constraints. It's like sentence structure should be this. It should move and have this sort of cadence and order and coherence. And so when we are kind of contractually engaging that, we're limiting this potential of going, you know what, let's go pre-grammatical. I call it pre-grammatical feminine language, which means we're not bound to rules of syntax or grammar, or really this notion of our writing and our words making sense.
Mhm.
It's like this seemingly incoherent way of like pairing words. Something I always like to do is kind of like these opposites, like agonizing bliss or like violent eroticism. Things that people kind of go like what does that mean? She's using words that are contradictory or seemingly opposite, but they're not. They're in that moment, you're creating a sensory portal, a somatic portal for people to be with. And so that's what I'm always doing with my writing is through the lens of being someone who operates in a highly mystical way, which is just a way in which I move through time and space and have immense sort of like pattern recognition and relational kind of interpretation, I guess, of seeing and experiencing things. It's then metabolizing that into something that I can say, this is what I experienced. This is a way that you can exist. This is something that you might be able to, a process that you might be able to have that shifts something within your body, that does like create that convulsion that alters you. And so here that is. Come into that, read that. Don't necessarily feel you have to consciously understand that, but let yourself, again, like it's pre-grammatical feminine language. You don't necessarily have to be approaching it through a cognitive space. And I find that's something that's like really for me, when there's parts of your work that you get like giddy about, it's like, this is so much fun. Like I like it's experimental. It really fills my cup. It like charges my being. My writing is that thing. Like I get the sort of like full body excitement around creating these spaces for people. And then people such as yourself will say to me like, wow, like, that really hits and that has altered me in this way, or I can feel a resonance here. And people, part of whenever you're doing any sort of writing and even teaching to a degree, you're never going to be able to create the same experience for every person. It's that they get to come and interact, and through their body and their perception and their structures, they're going to have their own like merging with that field. And so I think that that's really, to me, that's really exciting and what writing does. In a nutshell, that's like the writing side of things, what I do, which is kind of more of like it's not necessarily tied to my body of work, but it's my expressive mode of trying to, I guess a lot of people have like their business and their body of work and they speak directly to it of like, these are my teachings, this is what I'm bringing through. Whereas I to have my body of work and express through my embodiment of that body of work. And so I'm indirectly gesturing or posturing myself, saying like, this is what I've experienced through this body of work, but I'm not speaking to it directly. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes so much sense to me. But I'm like, yes, yes, yes. It's interesting because I find, and this is why I really resonate with a lot of the things that you do, because it is like the way you write it is sort of polarizing. It does make you sensationally feel your body. And it's something you can't grasp with your mind, which again is a huge part and piece of my work. Like I love feeling things, and like I love feeling like the eroticism and the sensation of like, words reorientating me, like feeling them in my body, feeling like I am an existential kinker, like all the way. Like I love like the pain and the pleasure aspect of them both. And you bring that through so beautifully and so tenderly and violently at the same time that it's like, oh, and it just like pulls you and it's like, yes. And I'm not sure many people, who aren't sort of drop down into their body and feeling this there, and highly sensitive, they might not feel that full pull. But I also love the way that you do something that most people don't do in business, right? Because of the systems that we've got in place. And again, this is a big body of your work too, right? Like the systems we have in place in regards to working online or our so-called business structures and marketing is there's systems and marketing, and this is what you do to sell, and this is how you package it, and this is what you do, and this is how you should speak to it. And there's all of these little things that, and you don't do that. And I love that so much, because people might not get it. Ordinary people might not get it and understand it, but it is you building this sort of like architecture and bringing things in a new way that is still working, that's energetic and aligned. And like it's you and your embodiment first. And I truly believe that everything is energy and everything is energy based. And like being an embodiment of the work you're bringing through is the only way to truly bring in aligned people, instead of just the old paradigm of just we're just wanting all this money. And like that's not to me like a true calling and mission. Like I feel like you're in alignment with that and it shows. And this is where we're starting to see that. And I think it's lovely that we're actually meeting at this like crucial time, because we are seeing a tipping point of these structures actually starting to collapse. And people are like, okay, how are we going to move? How are we going to do? How are we going to work? And you're bringing that forth. You're showing it, which is awesome, because yeah, everyone sort of, I feel the collective like a little bit scrambly at the moment. And you are just really anchored in it. And so it's really beautiful. And so I'm glad we're here at this moment to talk about it.
Yes, me too. I think that's like, it's what we were speaking about when we were messaging, is like this idea of being able to be creative and experimental with the way that you exist. I have a really deep passion or pull, or like requirement is probably a better word, to constantly be innovating or revolutionizing like existence.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not really satisfied with, even within spiritual or healing or embodiment domains, I just always end up reaching a point of dissatisfaction around the structure, or like the limitation or the lack of limitation, like the lack of containment. There is always something that ends up making me get a little bit of like an ick factor, or a like a sort of like a frown and a sigh of like I thought this was going to be more fruitful or deliver something more within my experience. And I think going through so many rounds of that, when you're exposing yourself and immersing yourself into pre-existing structures and systems, and you find that nothing is really leading you to that point that you want or desire, or it's not even outcome based, it's that it's not congruent with the truth of your being. I think is more the fact. Then you get to like be more creative. It's like, well, what do I want from a system and a structure? What do I actually want? What does existing mean for me? Like, what I am a very big kind of like existential ponderer to the point of like madness. And I always talk about with my husband this. I think that women as a whole, but particularly when you're in this space, like psychosis and madness is always just there. Like it really is. And there are times where you're like, oh, I'm crossing a bit of a dangerous threshold, but I'm somewhat tethered in a way. Like I have a safety line. That safety line may fray. It may get a little bit dicey out there. I went through a really like intense period at the start of this year, early in my pregnancy, like everything kind of just blew up. And I was in that space of being like, I could really teeter towards that divine madness right now of just going like over the edge. And the only thing that stopped me was the fact that I'm a mother and I'm pregnant. I have worldly responsibilities, but I think when you're a person that doesn't have parental obligations, that's easier to kind of drift into that. And then
Can attest. Don't have children here. Can attest that it's very easy for me to whoop.
and you can disappear there for a few weeks, a few months, and then you kind of gather yourself and think, okay, well, the time's probably now. I'm re-emerging, I'm restructuring. You do naturally come back into a form. You're not always lost there, I don't think. But I lost my track of thought. Sorry, this is pregnancy brain.
It's fine. And those dreams that we've been having. Whew.
Yes. Oh, in terms of the systems and the structures, I think that there is a need for having those questions around, well, what does embodiment mean? What are we wanting from embodiment? What are we wanting its applications, its presence in the world to like, it's how is it actionable? What impact does it have? All of these things, like I'm not really satisfied with this. Oh, I want embodiment. I want healing. I want ascension. I want expansion of this and that. It's like, but what does that even mean in terms of like a full system? And we need to be questioning if current paradigms that are working within that are suited to the outcomes that we want, or suited to dissolving the idea of outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where my body of work is really starting to emerge, which is looking at different energetic shapes. Like, and again, I'll try and break this down so it doesn't sound so like abstract and mechanical.
Yes, I would love that. I'd love that. And I'm sure everyone would be too, because it's one of, yeah. Break it down for us all. Break it down, because I'm sure that, when we are moving through, and I just want to highlight this, there's like no shame of not being able to grasp these concepts or feel them in your body, right? Like we are reorganizing, like we are going from a top down system where we've been head first, which is actually not the way we're supposed to be wired. And we're learning to reorient to ourselves, like to listen to like the body feelings and sensations, because your body picks up more signals and sends them to your brain than the other way around. So I just wanted to like highlight this, that if you have to sit with this and the wording and like let it land a little bit, there's like no shame in that, because you are just kind of like grasping this new way of being where it's not conceptual, logical based. And this is the way we're moving, like in the whole of the world, which is why I love that we're here doing the conversation right now. It's like we are actually reorientating, reorganizing, restructuring internally, as well as what we're seeing go on in the crazy world around us. So if you have to like sit for a moment to grasp it, and the biggest thing I can ever say, like just as a side piece, if this is all new to you, I would recommend really just being present in the body, and instead of trying to think about the words that Jade is saying, let them go a bit, sink deeper, like breathe into your body more, allow yourself to be like just fully present, and allow what she's explaining to actually move through you instead of trying to understand it. That's just a keynote on yes. So go for it. Go for it.
I also think it's important to note as well that part of why we're having such a big shift is this real identification and acceptance that everybody has different developmental landscapes, neuroprocessing styles, energetic body shapes. There are so many things that are altering the actual structure, which alters perception, alters interpretation, alters translation. And that's why everything is so nuanced and individual within a collective. That's something that's really beautiful, and that's something that's coming to the forefront of recognition. And the reason why I speak to things in this way isn't because I'm more highly skilled. It's because my neuroprocessing style is a high level pattern recognition. So I just want to preface with that as well. It's like, this is just the mode of operation for me. It doesn't mean that you need to assimilate your body and your language into the way that I'm speaking and the way that I operate. It's just that I can't speak a different way. It doesn't make sense to me. It wouldn't be coherent. But me getting to speak in more mechanical terms means that the transmission or the translation comes through. So I just want to lay that down as well, because I think that that gives more permission and this is what I'm finding is so many people are trying to force and contort themselves into systems and languages. And it's pretty much just processes of assimilation, even though they're like healing or embodiment, you're still assimilating and contorting into the wrong shapes and wrong syntax and wrong all of this, which means that you shut down and you deny or forfeit your perception. Your and that's like where your genius is going to come through, is the way that that like moves through those, like that power mode, that flow dynamic, all of that. It's I want everybody to really be coming into harnessing their like unique little quirks and structures and coherent states, because to me I think that we'll have a world of artistry and genius and innovation when we're speaking about organic technology that doesn't come through assimilation to other ways of being that aren't congruent with ourselves. So in terms of the sort of structures in the body of work that I'm bringing through, kind of I'm using that as a springboard to go there, because that in essence is what's underlying and motivating and the intention of having created this system to begin with. And a lot of that comes through, there is only so long that you can be in a wrong shape or attempting to operate in a way that isn't coherent for you just in general. But when you become a mum, you don't have the capacity to be in contorted, depleted, collapsed states. It just doesn't work. And you very, very quickly crash and burn really hard. And those sort of that spaciousness that you may have had previously that buffered some of the collapse, some of the depletion, some of the confusion don't exist anymore. You don't have the buffer zone that lets you pick yourself up, recalibrate, sort of strengthen and recontort back into that to try again. It's that you're then continuously exposing yourself into these states that are going to perpetually burn you out and collapse you. And that starts to become really incoherent very quickly when you have little people that are saying that need you in so many ways. And so the body of work, the Origin Codex, which is what I've named this upcoming immersion, but that's sort of like the mode of transmission of this body of work initially. But the body of work itself is around these energetic shapes and ontological shapes of feminine, creative, and existential authorship. I know that's a mouthful, but again, it's sort of like, to me, it feels like it's the name of like a scientific paper or something. It's very concise.
I love it though. I love it.
Because it's about like creative output, but it's about the fact that when we understand these things, it's just like a baseline for our existence as well. So it's both. It's the way that we are creatively engaging the world and the way that we are creatively existing within the world. But one thing that came through to me was this idea that we're really stuck within this singular space of myth and structure around like the heroine's journey, particularly, as women. We have this idea that our journey is going to be separation, descent, return, and that has a very specific energetic shape. It has specific power dynamics, flow dynamics. It moves a certain way within the world, energetically, psychically, physically, biologically, all of these things. One thing that we need to note is that the heroine's journey isn't really, it's not an incorrect ontology, it's not an incorrect myth. It's extremely valid for an entire cohort of women. But it is also based off like the hero's journey and is just a feminine adaptation of that. So it's not necessarily a standalone feminine arc. It's that it's something that's been taken and adapted for women to insert themselves within. That already can be a little bit problematic. So most of what we're doing when we're in our embodiment journeys, if we want to call it that, or just the way of existing, is we are continuously then contorting ourselves to be following this arc: separation, descent, return, integration, and that we're accruing power through this state of going down deep into the interiority. We're going to be dismembered through that process. We're going to go through a process of remembering. And then all of that's going to be brought up and integrated. And we come into this idea of this concept of like singular wholeness. There is a core identity, a core self that integrates all the aspects. She's the dominant one. It doesn't give place or space for different ontologies, different myth structures, different energetic shapes for women who don't have a core dominant sense of self that integrates other aspects.
I love this so much.
It started as this inquiry and again questioning, because I was like, I'm not that person. I don't ever cohesively integrate and go, I'm this solid singular sense of self and wholeness now, and I can move through the world and I'm strong and I'm empowered in that. I am always in my wholeness in a very fragmented, multiplicitous way in which aspects don't integrate. Aspects are standalone. It's more of an energetic shape of a network. Or I think of them as like outriggers, like stabilizers on a crane or a truck or something. So if I speak to like how the energy moves through this shape, instead of like within the heroine structure, where the sense of self then has to be the one that is stabilizing everything, regulating everything, making decisions for that. When you're in a different shape, it changes all the ways that you regulate, the way that you make decisions, the way that you move through the world. And so if you're in a state of like being multiplicitous, you can discharge and disperse some of that responsibility. You're not having to centralize that, which means there is a softening of the potentially some of the overwhelm that comes through of forcing a centralized decision making being. And so that's just one example. And so I've been building out this structure that speaks to 5 primary shapes, ontological frameworks. And that's not exhaustive. That's not the entire set. There would be infinite, but it's just starting to familiarize ourselves with like different language, different kind of experimental ways of, wait a second, I don't have to hold my body in a certain way. I don't have to hold a certain energetic shape, which then has certain narrative connotations, certain arc requirements, certain ways in which I have to exist. It gives more freedom at a really deeper energetic level to when you alter the energetic shape, you alter your experience, like the sensory experience. So you imagine like Sheeana as like you're sitting here, you think about feeling yourself as that singular centralized identity that has had to integrate everything into it. And you feel how like solid and vertical that is, and the amount of weight that is in that, because that's a big responsibility to be that pillar and to be driving that linear forward direction of like a timeline. Even if it's speaking to multidimensionality in that, it's still really coming back to this centralized aspect. You then think about allowing yourself to become all of the different aspects, either like imagining them as parallel aspects around yourself or nodes in a network. And you feel energetically and at a sensory level how that disperses. And do you feel how your field shifts and the body shifts?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Straight away. You're
Yeah.
speaking into things that I haven't heard people speak about. And I'm loving it because, yeah, I'm pretty in awe right now of like listening to you actually speak and anchor this in a way that I can grasp. I
Yes.
hope that everyone else can grasp as well.
Yeah.
Of and I really resonate with what you said at the beginning with like so many modes and modalities and everything. It is so structured. It is so, and this is just like I'm a bit mind blown at the moment because I'm like, oh my God, I could feel like how that it feels true to me, like
Yeah.
to my body and my system. Like even when you were talking, I could feel like my system easing and being like that makes sense. And I'm curious. I know this is a bit of a weird note, but do you believe? And I don't know why this question came through. There are people, women or people that are more inclined to feel this body of work and to actually grasp this rather than like I'm curious as to what their design would be to actually go, I can grasp this, I can feel this.
Yeah.
And this is actually how this feels incongruent with how I want to feel and move throughout this world. This feels like very true to my system. Whereas opposed other people, it would not be. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, firstly, like pretty much 3 groups: the neurospices, because
Okay.
female neurodivergent women are immediately going to understand the mapping and the complexity and sort of like the tracking of structure, because that's just a baseline. So that group of women is immediately going to be like, even if it's kind of within a mystical context, I understand the structural component or the mechanical component. That is the neurodevelopmental baseline and part of the neuroprocess, like the polymaths, the people who like just look at information, absorb, done, let's move on, next step. So that group of people are really going to resonate with this. And then you have women that are like the mystics, but they're kind of like experimental mystics. Not just, and what I mean by that, and again, it's not dismissing different cohorts of women. It's that some women are really satisfied in being archetypal representations of like a priestess or like, yeah, we'll just use that. My brain's not like coming up with another.
That's fine. That's
But you know
perfect.
what I mean? In terms of like the way that they move through the world, they're complete within the expression of being like that and being quite like a fluid state, and there being a lot of vastness and maybe ritual and like nebulous existence. Whereas for me, when I get into that, I don't, I've been there, I've like played within that realm, but the lack of mechanical structure actually voids some of like the mystic experience for me. So again, it's just like the way that you route into experiencing God, divine, cosmic patterning, living systems is going to be different. So women who are more like experimental within energetics and mysticism. And then the last group I would say is like women who are already like coherent to a degree or already have an access and embodiment within their own power, whether that's like creatively or professionally, but are just wanting to understand a more system-based approach of embodiment rather than it being like drop in, regulate, connect with your body. Like these things can be very like broad. Whereas when you're saying like, I have 5 shapes that I can like walk you through, you will be able to connect with these. I will teach you like phase transitions to identify when you're moving between a shape, how to identify when you're misseated, what the power dynamics are, what the flow dynamics are, like how that alters the trajectory of your being, and how that in many of those shapes, they're not really focused on this linearity or this like movement. So like we've spoken about like the heroine and then like the multiplicitous, but there's also like the mystic is another shape I speak to, who's really about orbital alignment, like orbital rotation, in terms of like she's not descending and dismembering. The power comes from the way that her, oh, I don't want to get too like mechanical here, but in terms of, you will understand this, Sheeana, but how when you need to align to receive data or downloads, however, whatever language you use around that, it's less about channeling in and it's more about this like rotational movement and this omnidirectional pulsation. And when the body becomes that, that's the actual channel. It's not to do with like a vertical channel, it's to do with more of a positional, rotational orbit that means that you become the full sphere, which is the channel. So again, these are just like they're well, I shouldn't say they're subtle differences. They're enormous differences within the energetic shapes. But I feel like it provides an opportunity for women to feel really, really empowered in identifying structures that actually support the truth of their being. Not having to, and this is what I mean, like I can't contort into a heroine. It doesn't work for me. And I've spent a lot of time in my life because that's the dominant framework, and it's the dominant framework culturally, like societally, in terms of, you know, accumulating power, building, growing, integrating, coming into this state of wholeness. It's very like outcome based. But when you're a person who's come to the conclusion of being like, my wholeness is never going to be integrated, what does that mean for me? It means new systems, it means new structures, it means new ways of moving through the world. And that's where we're getting at in terms of revolutionizing things. Otherwise, we're just in a loop. We're just playing the same thing again and saying, here, come, women, come in here, I'll teach you these things and these skills. They're the wrong skills and techniques and tools for these women. And then they wonder why they work for a little bit, but they crash out. And then it turns into like an internally directed, I'm doing it wrong. There's something wrong with me. I should be further ahead in my journey. Like, why am I not able to stay regulated? All of this stuff. And that is so fucking damaging. So damaging. That's almost worse than the starting point when you're kind of like all over the shop and still really embedded in like the matrix. When you come into a sense of healing and awareness and consciousness and then still feel like you're failing at your own experience, that's horrible. That's
It is.
horrible. And I think we've all been there. We've all been there. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the systems that we have in place, a lot of the modalities, a lot of the spiritual things, a lot of the embodiment, like all of this are actually setting a lot of people up to fail. And this is something that I really detest in my line of work, and I don't really align myself. So there's a lot of things that you've shared here that I'm just like a full fuck yes to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I sometimes I just feel like I'm a rebel without a cause, and I just like want to rebel at everything, the embodiment, the polarity, the sexuality spaces, like all of them. So I feel like I'm constantly sitting in this little like outside space of like, because what really irks me about these spaces and these systems and modalities and everything is just recycled garbage. And we're not actually sitting there in an energetic field one-on-one with someone in and moving with the current of like your body, your field, their unique body in their field, and letting them move and shift organically without trying to, and I see this a lot in like coaching spaces and spaces of healing where they're trying to control. And even in somatic work, like I do somatic work as well, it's like they're actually trying to control the outcome instead of letting this fully like sovereign person move into spaces and places they need to move organically that might not look like XYZ, right? Because we have this, our eyes have been like, we want to see, we don't like seeing anything out of the ordinary because we can't control it. And again, that's a paradigm that's been embedded into our system, not from us. And yeah, we don't feel the capacity within our own system because we haven't allowed ourselves to go into these different shapes and forms and energetic spaces, right? And I think, there's like this terror or this fear of being able to hold that when we haven't taken ourselves there. Yeah, but it's quite funny because you are speaking to a body of work, and what I want to really highlight is how you articulate it. So for me, what's really landing for me personally is I already know this in my body and my system, right? Like and sometimes I feel like I don't really like these shapes you speak of and these aspects and everything. Like I know we don't just sit here and like, because I'm like living proof. Like I am not a quintessential like mystical oracle or somatic therapist. Like I'm really not. I'm messy, I'm chaotic. I allow myself to express my full range. And sometimes, and that means even like my so-called like downloads, like how I get information and everything is fucking wild sometimes. And it's not by sitting here meditating, I can tell you that. Like it's not like it is really not, because and people are like, it is like it's chaotic and messy and very out of like the paradigms and structures that we see. And it feels very out of place for me, but I can't articulate. And like what I'm really sitting here, like you are really articulating and hitting these things that I know logically in my brain and I have been an embodiment of, but I haven't been able to quite articulate like what that is and how I'm able to, and I can't sit here and be a teacher in this work and go, oh, well, this is what I do, so you need to do this. Like that feels so incongruent to me because I know what works for me and my system. And it's hard. And it's hard to be a teacher or work in embodiment or a somatic therapist or be a body worker or anything like that when and say what I do and how I move and work. When and I don't have a modality, like I can't go, this. It's actually a testing field and ground. Like it's a co-explorative space to allow the energy and the shapes and the what needs to move through and birth through you at any given moment. And I think because of the world that we've been living in, we find that really hard to grasp. And I find that really hard to like market myself and to share myself and like, because people are like, what the fuck do you actually do? And you're like, well, I don't really know. I don't really know. Like I've done all these modalities and yet, somatic therapy, embodiment, like, sex, sexuality, like all of these things, like I'm trained in all these fields of work. And yet I would never like, I find it hard to sync myself up to that one modality because like you, I tend to feel like there's not enough space in there. There's not enough, like I get a little bit of the ick that it has to be a certain way and rigid and then we're not taking into like it's just there's so much more to the world and life and energy, and I just find that so hard to believe that we're living and clearly we're seeing it all sort of crumble down around us at the moment. How we are unable to really grasp the uniqueness of our like organic blueprint and know that like if something is right for someone, that doesn't mean the way to get to embodiment is that way for that person. Is going to be the same way for this other person, or whatever it is, like the way to channel is going to be the same way like somebody else does. Like I just find that so in my mind, and sometimes I feel like I'm a fucking alien because I can't grasp how we have as a society, like that's how we think. And even like in religion, even expressions of sexuality spaces, like all of these things, it's like, how have we been conditioned so intensely to think that every single person on this planet needs to follow X set of rules and do this set of thing to obtain some sort of like, I don't know, enlightened, better than sort of infrastructure. Like, I just don't grasp that. And I don't even think that that's what, like, if you, like Jesus was saying, like back in the day, like, I really don't, and I don't understand how people can't see that that has just created this, like, we've all become ill and sick, and we're looping on our own chains, basically. Like, we have like, and we have become a prisoner to those own chains. Like, we keep them in place because, yeah, and I can't grasp it. Like, and I'm like, what's wrong with me? But you're just sitting, but you're sitting here speaking, and you're articulating it so beautifully, that, you know, I think people will actually get and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes so much sense. I hope so. Well, we get it. It's only us here now. No, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it's important. Again, like, I'm always wary to say that like the status quo doesn't suit anyone, because I mean, like, the systems to be are shit, but at the same time that doesn't mean that there isn't like pure organic coding within that. And there are people that are really suited to certain structures and systems and ways of being. It's like, you know, ecologically, there are different things, different species have different roles and act in different ways. We can't expect everyone to be desiring to go deep into this body of work. Like, it just isn't going to be for everybody, but it's going to be for the few that really get it and who really want to operate in that way. It's the same as your body of work. And so I think I always caution around saying that current paradigms are completely trash, because if they were restored, or kind of like elements of it are like weeded out, I think that there are qualities there that are essential. Like, you know, there is always pure coding underlying things. But just what you were saying, like initially you said about capacity, and that's really what it's about. Like, when you have the correct structure and have structural coherence, you step into your capacity. Like, you have capacity because you can move energy, you can regulate, you can flow in the way that is congruent to your shape. And so it's like that whole thing. And I wrote a post recently about flow physics, or like flow dynamics, and it was speaking to, again, this like normalized narrative that flow and sort of like regulation is this like dropping in state of calmness and ease of friction, which like everybody benefits from being able to access that. And at the same time, like, for some people, flow, the only way you're going to be able to get into that is via a different way, which is like engagement of high complexity and like synthesizing or mapping material. And the way that you are engaging that creates flow, which is like more of a high load, high friction state, which goes against, again, like, we're always told like, this is the way, this is the equation is A plus B equals C. And it's like, well, I've got a friggin' like Z and like M in my equation with like brackets and like like there's like long division happening and algebra. So what do I do with my equation? I think something that I think about when you're saying like you've done all of these modalities and you can't pinpoint, I think we're stepping into an era of self responsibility, self governance, and self sort of like stewarding our genius, where it's like we've done the work, we've done the learning. You know, prior to my decade in the healing arts, in more spiritual and like quantum realms, I was a registered nurse. So I worked in allopathic health and had all exposure to the physical body. Love it. Think the body's amazing. Hate the fucking system. But in terms of like now, that stewarding is coming through synthesizing the material. And you can't synthesize, again, like you can't coherently synthesize material into a body of work that is coded through your genius and your perception if you're not seated in your true state of being and your shape. It will come out like garbly-goo. It will come out, there will be elements of it that are coherent, but there will be elements of it that make no fucking sense or are just forced because they're regurgitating little bits of this, little bits of that, because you're filling in the gaps of like where the contortion is, where the body is still being held in a certain shape where that isn't actually true to itself. So I actually think that you're in a beautiful position to start synthesizing.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm so filled up by your work. And this is what I love about how you share. And I really want to highlight this as, because I know a lot of people that listen to Alchemy are really coming like back home to themselves and finding their calling and really moving through their own shit to be able to step up in a more sovereign way. And I want to highlight this because a lot of us will be in business. A lot of us are actually sharing our medicine and our gifts. And that's what I feel is really like there's a resurgence of like sitting with our unique medicine. And I want to say, like, you on the outside looking in, to those that people who don't get it and it's not for, like, Jade's writing, it won't hit, it won't land the way Jade does business or share or whatever. You won't get it. And the people that do. So it was funny because I've always known, I've felt that I was probably going to work with Jade at some point. And it was interesting because as she brought through, I don't know, the words were hitting, she was just sharing, and I think you just inboxed me and said something, and I was like, actually, I really want to join this cohort. Like, I really want to be in it. I'm like a full fuck yes to it. I'm currently going over to America, but I don't even know if that's happening. But this is what I want to highlight, that you can show up in your like authentic shape, in your blueprint, in your essence, and move in a way that feels like in alignment and incongruent with that. And nobody else will fucking get it except for those people who are supposed to get it. And that's really beautiful because I believe that, yeah, that's the kind of the way, like, no marketing, no gimmicks, just this real, like, I don't know, like this coherence between like hearts, bodies, fields, whatever you want to call it. And you're like, yes. And it doesn't feel icky. It doesn't feel gross. It doesn't feel sound. It's just like, this is true. And this feels true. And I think that that's the way we're actually, yeah, we're moving. And I love to highlight that that is how you're already moving. And sometimes when you just see people moving in this way, it gives you just full permission in your being to be a little less rigid in how you feel you think you should move, and just start to sit with what is true and organic in your nature, and then shift a little bit differently. And I really hope that everybody on this podcast listens and takes that advice and way with them today, because I'm a yes. I would love to actually, before we sort of, I feel like we're kind of wrapping up at this moment, before I fully sort of wrap into how people can get in touch with you with this body of work, your offerings, where they can find you, I'd love for you to just sort of sit for a moment and just see if there's anything else that, like, any wisdom, any ongoing words you want to impart with everybody that's been listening and in this journey with us today, because it's been beautiful. Yeah.
I think I want to really bring it back to just what it means to be human. And I think with a lot of modalities and a lot of healing and seeking and pondering and all of this, we can sometimes skirt around the edges and end up completely missing the point, or disconnecting or dissociating from our humanness. And so even though this body of work is speaking in a really like energetic, mechanical, structural way, I want to make really clear that it's to support being a human. And this body of work has come from being a mum who has, I've had a really intense journey. Free birthed, I had a birth injury. I healed my birth injury all by myself outside the system. I discovered through cycles of burnout and really intense emotional sensitivity in motherhood that I was neurodivergent, which is how most women find out, is in motherhood or menopause, when you're having
Interesting.
the beautiful hormonal cascade and also the pressures. And so my human was fucking struggling. My human was exposed to immense amount of pressure, immense amount of collapse, immense amount of load. And I could not spiritualize my way out of that. I could not sit there in meditation and try and make peace with that when I felt like I was breaking and falling apart, and that aspects of the quality of my life were going to be, have be experienced in a different way than prior. So systems and structures and bodies of work aren't always birthed from these places of like beautiful, clean, creative fertility. I feel like oftentimes they're birthed from spaces of like dragging yourself across the ground, bloody and raw, and being like, I can't do this anymore. What is going to get me upright? Allow me to thrive, allow me to honor who I am, to serve myself as a woman, to serve my family, to model for my kids, to show other women that like you don't have to play the game, even if that's like the spiritual embodiment healing game, in the same way. You get to be really experimental, creative, playful, serious as well. Like I'm a really playful, but I'm a really serious person.
Yeah.
And I take that work, and I take creating a body of work really seriously. And so I just want to close by saying that like I don't want what I bring through to create this gap between me and people of like, oh, what's she talking about? This is really highly complex or like highly energetic data. It's like but it comes from this grounded experience of like, I'm a human, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm pregnant. Like what we were saying, like I'm not sleeping at the moment. I have a toddler that co-sleeps across my face and a baby that like kicks all night, and I need systems and structures that make me thrive in the truth of my being and my energetic shape. And that's how I regulate, and that's how I access my power, and that's how I can creatively keep building this framework out more and more into the modes of power, into the flow dynamics, into like feminine cybernetics, all of these like more advanced teachings that I want to get into. I can do that solely because I've anchored myself in my shape. And I understand that. And that was birthed from being a messy human that was like broken and beat down, and also knew that I was really freaking powerful and that I could get up and I could keep going, but I needed the correct containment and the correct state of being to support that. And so I just really want that to be conveyed, because it's very easy for us to think that people have perfect lives and everything's kind of easeful and like, oh, look at this woman who's created this, and have these like preconceived notions. And it's not always truth. It may be there, you don't have to be in hardship and, states of trauma and difficulty and turmoil to create. But I think those limitations and those constraints can be really, really powerful. And I just want other women to know that, and to know that like their power lays in all spaces and states of being as well.
Oh my God, my heart is just bursting for you at the moment. Like, I have so much, like, just awe and reverence for you and your body of work. Truly, like, in my body, in my heart, I'm like, yes, because yeah, even your pieces of the humanness and stuff, like I think I attract those people anyway, those people that are not in the spirit realm of, illusion, people who are very anchored and grounded in their humanness. I'm very raw and real with like my journey and how, yeah, I can shift into madness sometime. I don't have a family to anchor me here, guys. So it makes me emotional actually, because like I love, yeah, just the absolute dissolution of like what it is to be mystic, what it is to be a woman, what it means to be powerful, and what it means to be like just human here in the flesh and doing this work. And I think that that just hits and resonates and is so authentic. And I just love you for it. So please, thank you so much. It has actually truly been my honor to have you in this space. And I would love for you to share, how people can find you. I'll put all of this on the notes as well so that you can reach out if you're a full fuck yes to this work and this is hitting you. I will encourage you to join. I am trying everything I can to join myself. But yeah, how can people find you and do this work?
So with this particular body of work, which is called the Origin Codex, I'm running a 3-day online immersion on the 27th to the 29th of March. So that's Australian Eastern Daylight Time. If you're in the US, that's like the day before for you. And that's going to be 3 hours per day over those 3 days, which is a really good sort of length of time for us to drop in, cover kind of like the full curriculum of introducing you to this, the 5 shapes, power modes, flow physics, ontological shifts, how you really integrate this and become a steward of your own artistry, creative, existential, and then moving from that position within the world. So it's kind of like a really like an intensive. I was going to say it's really intense. It's an intensive immersion. You're getting like a full. Like the intent is that you come in, and through the course of being exposed to the material, you are restructured and returned to the correct shape, the correct seating for you. And there's going to be very like practical ways of learning how to recognize, learning how to shift. So like it's not all this abstract material. It's got a grounded basis in application. That's March 27th to 29th. I am doing that by application. So within my bio on Instagram, which is at Jade James Ontologies, I have just a Google form. It has all the details, including like dates, investment, participation requirements, which is really just feeling into if you feel aligned. I expect people to turn up and be willing to really be present within the field. I don't like stragglers that are just there to like kick their toes in the dirt and kind of be like, oh, well, this, I don't really like this or that. It's like you turn up if you are resonant. If you're not, don't come into the field because it starts to disrupt the field, particularly because I'm keeping it to 6 women because I want the intimacy and the integrity of the field and the way that that's transmitted and able to be with the women in sort of like a one-on-one whilst we're in the group. So there's that. I'm also going to be co-facilitating a longer program with a woman named Christina Marie from the Voyages of the Spirit. And so she is this amazing woman. She's an ex-editor, works kind of within the realm of myth and story arc and supports women writing their books, but with like a transformational undertone, really like the anchor point is having an editor support you writing, but she's doing this like mystical, energetic underwork with that. So we're creating a program that's like to be advised, but that's going to be coming up starting in April. And then I'm having a baby in June. So it's really just this immersion. And then I'm going to run once Bub's Earthside and postpartum's settle, I'll run the second immersion on that, which is going to be more of the advanced teachings. But this first immersion is a prerequisite because I don't want you to let people coming into that space without that foundational knowledge and the ability to work with that for several months before going into that. So I'm really like sparse on the ground this year just because of mothering full-time, pregnant, leading into that space. But it's really just going to be like several immersions this year, and they're all going to kind of be off of this body of work. So it's like, yeah, if you want to join, if you're wanting to go into that in a more advanced capacity, the starting point is this March immersion.
Yes, yes, yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I hope this was delicious. I feel like that is it. And I will see you next week on Alchemy. Jade, you are absolutely so wonderful. And if you want to connect with her, you can find her over on IG. I will share that. See you next time. Bye.